So I'd like to talk about my first dealings with occult sciences and actual magic practicing. So becoming a practitioner. It's because of how complicated some of the grimoires can be, especially when you're first. Maybe you've done a lot of research and you know the premise of magic and have done a lot of the historical research. But when you're getting into the moon cycles, the planetary hours, the sheer commitment and time restraints and demand of a lot of these rituals, I would suggest starting with one that is not jumping into, summoning in demons and requiring a lot of consecrated tools and really finding a space to conduct a large-scale operation. Something that is easy to do on your own starting out would be something like the Ars Notoria from the Lemegeton. It's quite different as you're really just doing orations in front of ancient paintings that you can find in the grimoires. And it's for rapid learning of various subjects, rhetoric, dialectic, logic, geometry, astrology, theology. There's a lot in there. The books are more expensive than some of the other grimoires, like popular ones like Lesser Key of Solomon, etc. But it's well worth the buy because it's very applicable in your career, in education, in your everyday life, how you conduct yourself, how you speak. The technology behind the Ars Notoria is very interesting. You're repeating a large array of angelic or demonic names while inspecting something called note, which are these old depictions of sacred geometry with angels and stuff like that, which is supposed to trigger something in your mind to rapidly learn these subjects. And it's interesting how it works because with these long orations, which means, paragraphs of names that you're supposed to recite out loud, you need to say them with intent. So it's obviously you're kind of in it, you're believing in it. And the words some of them are very similar and repetitive, but are slightly different from one another and very hard to actually say aloud properly. And Solomon has in the book warned to say the names very properly because you're addressing, potentially angels and demons who are very powerful, so you don't want to screw up their names, sort of thing. And we're talking about having to do these orations and beginning the ritual and stuff at very specific times and revisiting it throughout the day, throughout the week, until completion. And each subject is basically one sprint of a ritual. So you can stop after completing one topic, but that might take you a couple of days. Some of them take very long. Like we're talking about several moon phases, some of them, I believe. And the most interesting part about it is, back to kind of the technology around it, is you're saying them so frequently, these names, just one after another. They're all different, but very long and complicated and ancient sounding. Your speech and your articulation is improving just from reading constantly and making it a habit, which everybody knows, the secret to learning something and success is revisiting it over and over, and it's forcing you to do that. And during the operation, you're supposed to be studying the topic you're looking to rapidly learn. So I think in today's world, it's quite effective to gain what you're trying to get out of it, to gain these sorts of tools and and knowledge, because a lot of people don't do a lot of reading nowadays, and they also don't do a lot of studying potentially. Back in the day when these books were popular in the medieval times, without technology and cell phones taking up all their time with social media, they likely were reading books constantly. And, and especially if you were a dedicated student at these universities in the, medieval times in the 14th century and so on, they'd probably be doing all this studying. And if it didn't come naturally and they weren't just getting super intelligent on the subject, they would take something like the Ars Notoria and use this technology to try to absorb it. But even without having any real element of magic, like even if you don't believe in occult magic, the actual ritual itself is helping you gain the knowledge faster, and or just in entirely, which you wouldn't otherwise practicing it if you weren't practicing it. So yes, back to the names. They're repetitive, but your articulation's improving by pronouncing these complicated words over and over and over. Your memory is triggered because some of the names are very similar, but they differ slightly. And when you're repeating it all, you notice these things, and your brain goes back to the last time you repeated it, like whether that was even like a week or two ago in the last moon cycle, moon phase on the planetary hour, etc. It just works. It's very hard to explain. And I don't, it's hard to say if there is that, that magical element per se of these angels and demons, but because it makes you believe, the intent is there, the imagination is there, and the emotion is there. Those three things that we discussed are necessities to occult magic and for it to be functional. So to give you an idea about some other surrounding ritual to the Ars Notoria is like even before you begin, there's a very specific process that you need the angels to allow you to begin studying this thing. And what you need to do is there's 3 variations of plants they give you can use for this beginning part of the ritual, but you need to acquire, I used olive tree leaves because that's one of the plants you can use. I was able to find a small olive tree shrub for sale in my city, although it was hard to find. And you have to take a brand new pen, it says, and you have to write these 4 angels, I believe they're archangels, the names on 4 separate olive tree leaves. And then you take purified water. It's very specific about it being purified, which you can actually just buy purified water, really, in a brand new glass. Has to be real glass, not ceramic or anything else. And you mix the purified water with rose water and saffron, and then you rub the ink from the angel names you wrote on the leaves. You rub the leaves into the water so the ink comes off into the water. And they refer to it as the angel water, the angel name water. And you have to, after doing that, you drink it, and then you go to sleep that night. And you need to have a dream where the angels permit you to study. If you have a negative dream, it means you cannot continue right now. You have to wait until the next moon phase, until there's a new moon, and you can try again and ask. And if you wait until you have a positive dream, and only then can you begin. Strangely enough, the first time I did this, I did have a particularly positive dream, and I barely ever remember my dreams. I don't know what it is with my REM sleep maybe or something like that. I kind of have a little bit of an insomnia in my life, but that night after doing the angel name water asking part of the ritual at the very beginning, I had an unforgettable positive dream. And you're not allowed to discuss how you like the dream itself or how you knew whether to proceed. It says not to, but I'll just say for some reason it really did work, and it was convincing. And this was the very first grimoire I really got into, and it is recommended for beginners because it doesn't require you to draw a circle or deal directly with any sort of manifestations and doesn't require you to do a lot of physical labor or acquiring of things. It's really just a book. Well, the olive trees, that's kind of complicated, but you can use some, maybe there's other options listed there that are easier for you to obtain. But yeah, so I would just say, like, you just kind of have to jump into it. I would recommend jumping into something less intricate. Well, I'm sorry, the Ars Notoria is very intricate, but it is not as, I just feel like it's still one of the least complicated real medieval grimoires, like of the Lemegeton, to begin practicing. And I think once it's just a good introduction to show you how magic works, because those aspects that you're trying to improve in your life actually do. And whether it's because of the, angels or demons that they say, or not, the practice itself just works to improve. And, I think in the medieval times, they potentially did not have real great ways of explaining why things work in the science of learning or in education. So, and religion was so closely related to their everyday lives that putting things in the context of angels and demons and this is what it's doing, so you better follow it properly and this sort of thing, that's the guidance that is just practical and just works somehow, and it probably did even more so at that time. So yeah, it's kind of hard to explain at first, but I think it's just a good one to get into. Again, that's called the Ars Notoria. I would recommend Dr. Stephen Skinner's Method B book, which is there's two versions, Method A and, or sorry, Book A and Book B. Book B is the method, where Book A is more of the historical context and the research behind the Ars Notoria in general and an explanation. And Book A does have the larger versions of the note, the illustrations that you need to inspect after doing the oration. But Book B still has the note. They're smaller, but it gives you very precise direction on the ritual itself, when to begin, the moon phases, the dates, the times, the numbers of times you need to repeat certain prayers and orations, the numbers of times you need to inspect the note, and when you're able to inspect it. You're not always supposed to inspect them. It's complicated, but Method B book, Ars Notoria by Dr. Stephen Skinner. It's like $100 or something on Amazon, but it's well worth the try if you have an interest, and I guarantee you will see some sort of results in your life if you're really doing the ritual and practicing it the way you're supposed to be. So yeah, that's Occult Basics number 3, the Ars Notoria, and thanks for listening.